And tonight we're going to explore the life of King Saul from the 13th chapter of 1 Samuel. In this one chapter, we see God's plan for an epic battle between the army of Israel and the Philistines. God's plan was very simple. The armies of Israel were outmanned, outmatched, and didn't even possess any swords and spears, which you'll see at the end of the chapter is quite interesting. It's true, they were about to rush into a sword fight with no swords. But stripped of any human strength, the Israelites were poised for God to give them a great victory over their enemies because they could not rely upon their own strengths, because they would have to rely upon his strength for him to do for them what they could not do for themselves. But something happened that derailed the entire thing. As the author of one article I read earlier this week said, Saul had a misalignment issue. A misalignment issue. You all know what that word means. Think of the front end of your car after a little dust up. You step on the brakes and immediately the car pulls badly to one side or the other instead of braking straight. That's misalignment. Keep that concept in your head tonight as we read 1 Samuel 13. So without going any further then, I think what I would like to do is ask you folks to open your Bibles. I hope you brought them. I don't know if I want to just ask certain people to read, because I'm not sure if you have your Bible. So let's have some volunteers here. 1 Samuel 13. And maybe we'll have someone read to start verses 1. And let's go down to verse 4. And then we'll find someone else to read. Is there someone who would be willing to read those first 4 verses?
Sure.
Okay, Rick, read that. And then someone read from verse 5, say down to verse 10. Someone willing to do that? Okay, sure. Gary. Thank you, Gary.
Okay.
And then verse 11 through to 15. Somebody else willing to do that? 11 to 15.
I can.
Mrs. Little. And then finally, the last section, verses 16 down to 22.
Yeah, I can do.
Maria, thank you. Okay. So I think we had Rick reading the first 4 verses. Rick, is that right? And what translation you have, let us know what translation you're reading from as well.
Okay, this is the NIV.
Okay.
And the title is Samuel Rebukes Saul. Saul was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned over Israel 42 years. Saul chose 3,000 men from Israel. 2,000 were with him at Michmash and in the hill country of Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan at Gibeah in Benjamin. The rest of the men he sent back to their homes. Jonathan attacked the Philistine outpost at Geba, and the Philistines heard about it. Then Saul had the trumpet blown throughout the land and said, "Let the Hebrews hear." So all Israel heard the news. Saul has attacked the Philistine outpost. Now Israel has become obnoxious to the Philistines, and the people were summoned to join Saul at Gilgal.
Okay.
And then Gary, verses 5 down to 10.
Continuing with the NIV, the Philistines or Philistines? Sorry.
Philistines, yeah. Either way.
Okay, Philistines assembled to fight Israel with 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and soldiers as numerous, as the sand on the seashore. They went up and camped at Michmash, east of Beth Aven. When the Israelites saw that their situation was critical and that their army was hard pressed, they hid in caves and thickets, among the rocks, and in pits and cisterns. Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul remained at Gilgal, and all the troops with him were quaking with fear. He waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. So he said, Bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings. And Saul offered up the burnt offerings. Just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrived, and Saul went out to greet him.
Gary? And then I think it was Lori, was it?
What have you done? Asked Samuel. Saul replied, when I saw that the men were scattering and that you did not come at the set time and that the Philistines were assembling in Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord's favor, so I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering. You have done a foolish thing, Samuel said. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people because you have not kept the Lord's command. Then Samuel left Gilgal and went up to Gibeah in Benjamin, and Saul counted the men who were with him. They numbered about 600.
Okay, thank you, Lori. And now Maria, the last 5 or 10 verses, 6 or 7 verses there.
I'm going to be reading from the Living Bible, which I
Okay.
normally don't use, but I wanted to try something different tonight.
Sure.
So chapter 13, verse 16. Saul and Jonathan and these 600 men set up their camp in Geba in the land of Benjamin. But the Philistines stayed at Michmash. 3 companies of raiders soon left the camp of the Philistines. One went toward Ophrah in the land of Shual. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing these words right. Another went to Beth-horon, and the third moved toward the border above the valley of Zeboim near the desert. There were no blacksmiths at all in the land of Israel in those days, for the Philistines wouldn't allow them for fear of their making swords and spears for the Hebrews. So whenever the Israelites needed to sharpen their plowshares, discs, axes, and sickles, they had to take them to a Philistine blacksmith. The schedule of charges was as follows. For sharpening a plow point, 60 cents. So it goes through this whole thing. For sharpening a disc, 60 cents. For sharpening an axe, 30. For sharpening a sickle, 30. For sharpening an ox goad, 30. So there was not a single sword or spear in the entire army of Israel that day, except for Saul and Jonathan's. The mountain pass at Michmash had meanwhile been secured by a contingent of the Philistine army. So it's a little bit different. It sounds a little bit different in that translation.
Love it. It was fantastic. Okay. Let's do the 5 W's of journalism here to start with. Who's the characters? Who was the protagonist? Who's the antagonist here in this story? Let's just so that we lay the foundation here. Let's unpack this story, make sure you're clear what's going on. So talk to me, folks, about the who. Who's going on? Or who are the who's in this story? An easy question. Maybe I'll ask Brian. Brian, are you willing to talk, Brian?
Sorry, I was just, the kids are doing a little bit of homework, so I was just, I stepped away.
Okay, that's fine. That's the danger when I ask. Is there anybody willing to tell us who the protagonist, the antagonist, the good guys, the bad guys?
Well, there's Saul.
Jonathan.
Okay, so Ed, go ahead.
Saul and Jonathan.
Saul and Jonathan. Yep.
Samuel.
The prophet, Samuel the prophet, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Philistines.
Mhm. Antagonists, the bad guys,
Yeah.
right?
Philistines.
Yes. What's going on?
Well, they're preparing for this battle, right? And so it's interesting because, when you look at it, I'm still using the Living Bible here, But mine started a little bit different. It said, by this time, Saul had reigned for 1 year, in the second year of his reign. So when we think of Saul and how long he's reigned, here he is pretty early on in his position as a king in his second year. So he's going to war with the Philistines. Interesting enough, they don't have swords because they're not allowed to have blacksmiths to make swords for themselves. So they're going in.
Yeah, what kind of warrior king would lead his people to battle? I mean, what does that tell us about Saul?
Well, two things.
Uh-huh.
Either he has great trust in God or he is incredibly stupid.
This is a very interesting story because of the interaction that Saul has with Samuel. What's going on there, folks? We read that. We picked up that story, that part of the story in verse, where is it? Verse 7. I think it starts there. Verse 8, actually. Is someone willing to just, sort of relook at those verses and try to, in your own words, tell us what's going on there? And if not, you go ahead and you can jump in if you like. You're our co-host tonight. But I want to give everybody an opportunity to speak and sort of get involved, right?
So
Well,
you go ahead.
There's quite a pre-story to Samuel showing up. You've got, it says here that there's 3,000 soldiers from Israel, 3,000 men, 2,000 of them are with Saul and 1,000 of them are with Jonathan. And Samuel told them that he would come in 7 days, and then he doesn't show up quite as Saul thought. So, they're waiting for Samuel to come and bless them, right? I mean, that's what they're waiting for.
But interesting enough, there's so many points here that, this is happening. And why is Saul so anxious? Because his men are leaving. It seems like they're leaving from what I can read here.
Hiding.
Yeah, go ahead, Ed and Shirley. Yeah, I think that was you.
Well, they were hiding in holes and rocks, wherever they could find security.
What does that tell us? What does that tell us about them, by the way?
They're scared.
They're terrified.
They're terrified, right?
Well, I would say that they didn't have the confidence that God was leading in all of their prior successes, and God had led. But I'm going to say that Saul did not consult with God. It was his idea, and he was going to ask Samuel to come and bless it after he injured the Philistines and made them angry. So
Yeah, he poked the bear, and then he wanted Samuel to give blessings on his initiation already.
yeah.
But there was a deal here. There was a deal here. He was waiting for Samuel to come, right? It wasn't like they were just Samuel just showed up out of nowhere. No, there's a backstory here. They were waiting for Samuel to come and give them their blessing, to pray over them, to give them spiritual guidance, to pray God's blessing upon them to go to battle. So they're waiting for that. Now, yeah, it's true. They poked the bear here, but they're waiting. But as you said, people are, the warriors of Israel are getting nervous, and they're beginning to jump ship. Yeah.
I think it reflects the confidence that they have in their leader as well. I mean, if Saul's nervous and anxious about this, I mean, it's got to be affecting his people too.
Mm-hmm. So
I think Saul was anxious for a couple of reasons, and one of them was when he started seeing his people leaving, he was getting more, like that's what I got out of this. He was getting more and more anxious as people are leaving. And why did he do this sacrifice is because he was worried that he would be left without men. Men were losing heart, they were leaving. And so, and it says right here, Saul in verse 8, so he said, Saul's troops were rapidly slipping away. So, these people are waiting for 7 days. Samuel told him 7 days. And so he doesn't show up. So the troops are like, okay, we're not getting God's blessing here. We're without swords. Start slipping away. It's kind of like a vicious cycle where Saul was probably nervous about this. Samuel is not showing up. Saul is getting more nervous. The troops are picking up on this. They're leaving, making Saul more nervous. And so Saul then says, I'm just going to proceed with this myself. Can we blame the guy? I mean, Samuel did promise that he would be there in 7 days, a man of God, not upholding his end of the bargain. Is there any responsibility to be put on Samuel?
That's a good
Well-
question. What do you
Well, does
think?
it actually say that Saul or Samuel was late? It doesn't say he showed up on the 8th day. Maybe it was near the end of the 7th day, but it doesn't say he was late. So maybe they just didn't wait till the end of the 7th day.
Didn't wait long enough. They were impatient. There's no
Yeah.
question about it. There's no question about it. It says here, let's see here. What in verse 11, what have you done? Asked Samuel. So it's like he's saying, no, wait a minute. You had a responsibility here, and you've usurped what I was responsible for. You've taken my role. And let's not forget that Saul, as a king, had no business taking. I mean, we just looked at this last week in our Sabbath school class. The king had no rights whatsoever under God to perform the priestly role, right? He had his assigned task before him, and Samuel, the prophet, they were waiting for him. And this was his job to offer up the burnt offering, right? Folks, maybe let me ask Maria this. Maria, 2022. Does this ancient story ring any bells for us living today in the 21st century?
I think it does in so many ways, in personal ways, in national ways and political ways. So, for me personally, there's been not just 2022, but just in general, there's so many times where I wait for God, and I keep reading his promises. Ask and it will be given to you, right? Knock and the door will be open. Seek and you will find. And I'm like, okay, these are promises. I'm knocking, I'm seeking, I'm asking. Where is the answer, right? So for me personally, that's happened many times. It's happening now, as we're still doing this whole house hunting thing, and it's happening with many other things. I think from a Christian perspective, things can get pretty tough, and we're like, just the other day I said, Lord, it's okay if you come, please. When is this coming? We've heard of wars and rumors of wars, and that's been, I mean, Jesus said, you'll hear of wars and rumors of wars, and we're hearing that, and just kind of feeling like, okay, I know we're close. Everybody says we're close, but what does that mean to God? Does that mean like a year, 2 years, 10 days, 10 years, a decade? I don't know. But so, just waiting for that. And then for many people with COVID, the whole COVID thing is like this, for some people, like hoping that the lifting of all these restrictions. Well, when is that going to happen? Because that's important to some people, right? Or for some people, well, when is everybody going to get vaccinated? When is that going to happen? Or when are we going to reopen the churches? And just waiting on God I find that challenging myself. And so having that patience, I mean, I can sort of, what Saul did was wrong. Okay, he's totally in the wrong. But I feel for the guy, because sometimes I'm in that same situation. I go, God, come on, it's getting bad here. The soldiers are leaving.
The journey of faith and patience. Remember, we started, Maria, with that word alignment or misalignment. And obviously, Saul somehow is out of alignment here with God's will. 7 days he was to wait. Samuel was to come, make an offering, make an anointing, put his blessing upon Israel and Israel's warriors. But they had to wait. They had to wait. Boy, waiting can be difficult, can't it, folks? Waiting can be difficult. And when we don't know what's going on in the, behind, what's the old expression? Behind the dim unknown, right? What is God doing? Think of Job, right? So what do you folks think? Can you resonate with what Maria is talking about here?
Absolutely. I have a thought on that, and that is that for the last, I don't know, let's say 4 or 5 years, in the news, we've heard the word unprecedented so many times. Unprecedented this, unprecedented that. We have a new word called atmospheric river. Where'd that come from? Because they're trying to convince some folks that there really is climate change happening. But you know what I mean? To me, as one who left the church 25 or so years ago, and then I'm back now, I feel that it is so much closer now than it was 25 years ago, because I don't remember all these unprecedented things. So I don't know if anyone else agrees with that, but that's kind of my thinking right now.
Let's go back to the scripture here and let's read another passage here. It's still in 1 Samuel 13. Oh, now I took my glasses off. I need to put them back on. In verse 13, look how Samuel responds. Look what he says to Saul. You acted foolishly, Samuel said. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. Oh, just let those words sink in. I mean, this small thing, really? And then he goes on to say, but now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him leader of his people because you have not kept the Lord's command. Who's Samuel referring to here?
David, for sure, right?
David, yeah.
I find it very interesting. I
ahead,
just wanted to say, sorry to interrupt. Find it very interesting that, so here is Saul. He had just committed this act of sin in direct disobedience to God. Samuel comes here and says, God has already found your replacement. I was kind of like taken aback when I saw that. It was like, he just committed the sin. Like, when did God already find this man? But Samuel says, you've been replaced. We found a man. Well, God found his own man. And I'm like, whoa, Saul was just sort of going through this disobedience act when Samuel showed up. So God found this, it says God has already found this man just throughout this whole thing. I thought it was very sudden.
Does this make you think, Maria, that maybe God seems a little harsh here in this picture? I mean, how do you picture God when you see this? Because, like you said, it's already done. And Shirley, I think I just saw your hand up. Is that correct?
Well, the thing is, God knew what was going to happen before it ever happened. And Saul was judged because he didn't have faith in God. It's hard for us too to have faith. And I agree that probably many of us would have fallen as bad as Saul did under the circumstances. But God saw that he didn't have enduring faith that was going to be able to lead Israel victoriously.
I have to agree with what you're saying there. And because it does seem a little harsh, like he made this mistake. It was a bad mistake, but it was like, okay, you're done, you're cut off. And it almost reminds me of, when the Israelites did not want to go into the promised land because they're scared of the giants. And it's like they were just cut off for 40 years. And so I'm sitting here sometimes and I go, wow, is this the God of love that we serve, where it's like you make a mistake, you disobey, and you're gone, you're cut off. That mistake will basically determine the rest of your life. And it sounds like that. And that is scary.
Yeah, now there's there is a something going on behind the scenes here.
That's
And obviously, if we see a picture of God who's already said to Samuel, this thing's done. So his foresight is involved here. So let's think a little bit more about that and the character of God and who he does choose. He chooses David. But wait a minute. Was David really, it says here, how does it describe here? It says, the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him leader of his people. Well, what was it? And the hints in that sentence, of course, Maria, but what is the difference? How is it that Saul was out of alignment, but David wasn't? Because we all know that David was a flawed human being.
So, my version says a man who will obey him. So just a slightly little bit different. So the terminology, a man after God's own heart, has two meanings in my books. One is a man who is according to God's wishes and will. And the other one is a man who searches to find out God's will. So searches for God, searches to want to be with God, right? So when those two concepts kind of come together, to me, that's what David had. David was a man who obeyed God in most cases. His desire, his motivation was to trust and obey God because he wanted to find out what God wanted him to do. He wanted to obey. He was after God's heart. He was like trying to search out what God's will was. And those two concepts we can clearly see in David for most of his life, even though he messed up. Whereas with Saul, you talked about that alignment. And Saul, you can see that he was missing that. He wanted to go to this war. He was afraid. Fear kind of took over him, probably because of lack of faith when he saw his people leaving. And so now he just wants to do what he can do to almost like to appease God. This offering has to be done. So it's almost like he looked at this offering as a deed that was important to do to appease God. And so he looked at the offering very different than what God wanted him to look at it. And that's why he did it, because he didn't respect it.
He didn't respect it. I see a hand up. Gary, were you wanting to dive in here?
Yeah, now this might be very superficial because I don't know what happens after this. I don't know what the outcome with Saul and Jonathan is later on. But I think I don't know if I see that as God being harsh against a human who kind of fell out of alignment. I think if I were Saul, I'd feel some relief. Because I know I have not the same faith and trust in God that I once had and should have now. And I also know that, and I've been reading from this wonderful book, Kyung and I have, I was reading about David, and he was on fire. He was so much on fire. Have mercy on me, oh God. Create in me a clean heart. I mean, you can't find a more motivated warrior for the Lord, I don't think. And so I don't know, maybe I'm just in a fantasy land here, but I kind of think that, again, if I were Saul, I'd feel some relief and thankfulness that, oh, I've maybe outlived my usefulness. But again, I don't know what comes after this story. So
Did I see your hand up, Lori? Were you? No, sorry. Yeah, this, the beauty of this story that we've only read one chapter, it continues on. And so the picture you have of God, you need to gauge that against what comes next. The story does not end here, folks, as you all know, right? It doesn't end here. But this is a very intriguing story. We have really now one king of Israel who's already, God is already saying, sorry, bud, you're done. But he's not done. He continues to reign. And we see the fruits of his reign continue on for, I'm not sure, I should look this up. Is it 38 years? 38 years after this. 40. Thank you, Shirley. I was so yeah. So we have that story, and we begin to now look at the story from the perspective of God's heart over that long reign, and the fruits, by your fruits, Jesus once said, you shall know them, right? So that question, will leave that question for further study in this story and further study and meditation for ourselves. But now we come to this whole, yeah, Shirley, do you have a hand up? Yes.
I just wanted to say that God had a covenant people. It was Israel. They were never supposed to have a king in the first place. God counseled them against it. Samuel counseled them against having a king, but the people insisted on having a king. But God still had a plan. He had to have a people through whom Jesus could come to redeem the world. And he gave the people the king that they wanted, but God still had to overrule because he has a plan to redeem the world.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, folks, maybe I should ask you this question. Put yourself in this story. I wonder if anybody is willing to say, okay, here's where I see myself in this story. Do you see yourself like a Philistine in opposition to God's family, God's army? Do you see yourself like one of the trembling, hiding members, the doubting, trembling members of the army of Israel who are hiding in caves and seeking out the low places? Do you see yourself like Saul, King Saul, feeling pretty good about things and wanting to take it all in your own strength and go for it? Maybe do you see a little bit of Samuel in your own heart? Where do you, if you in all honesty could say, here's where I see myself in this story, where do you see yourself? And are you willing to maybe share a little bit of that with us tonight? I know it's a bit of a loaded question, and it might be hard. How about you, Maria? Would you, I mean, it's such a loaded question, and I don't want to pressure anybody, but yeah, if you were back there, where do you think you in the sense of where you're at today, where would you fit yourself in this story?
It is a tough thing to
Tough question.
analyze. But I think that one of the things I struggle with is waiting on God. And so a little bit of Saul, and I know nobody wants to say that they find themselves like Saul because we're supposed to be Christians and not act like Saul.
But we take matters into our own hands, right? When the pressure is on.
I struggle to understand. I want to see God's plan. I'm a planner. I'm a problem solver. And I want to, and that those are talents and qualities that God gave me, and I want to see God's plan, and I'm willing to follow His plan, but I want to see it. And sometimes I see it, and sometimes I walk away from it because I'm not sure. Is that really God's plan? I question it. And so I do struggle personally. I struggle with patience, being patient and waiting on God. I find that difficult. So from that perspective, um, I do struggle with that point.
Do any of you feel like maybe you're David? You're sitting in the wings, and God has put an anointing on you, but now you're wondering, what do I do with this thing?
Throughout the whole, like when I read the Bible and I read all I was just thinking today about Abraham and how long he had to wait for his promised son. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, why? Why is God making people wait so long he gives a promise and then you're going to wait for years? And I'm like, okay, why? Why is he doing this? And some people say, well, it's to test your faith, it's to increase your strength, it's to increase your trust in him, and to increase your faith. And I've seen that happen, but I've also seen the opposite happen, where people are like, forget it. I'm done. I'm done waiting. I've trusted, I've prayed, I've had faith. And, Pastor, you told me you prayed for a particular thing. You didn't tell me what it was because, that's your thing. But you said you prayed for something for like 13 years or 18 years and it didn't come to be. And it's like, man, isn't that a recipe for disaster? Because God's making you wait for such a long time. And I'm like, why? I don't always see the why. So I struggle with the why. Why make people wait so long when for some people it doesn't build up faith and it doesn't build up trust? It actually drives them away from God.
The great fifth question of the 5 W's of journalism: why, who, what, where, when, and why is this happening, and why did it happen? And yeah, Gary, I think you got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm so glad that Maria was asking those questions because it helped me to think back to 25 years ago, whenever it was. And I do remember, I'm pretty sure it was Ellen White, and perhaps it was in Desire of Ages, Great Controversy. I'm not sure what book, or maybe it was a sermon. But anyway, the answer that I embraced at that time was because, and I think this was, again from, was inspired by God, was because his remnant church hasn't finished its work yet. And he wants all the people in the world to have an opportunity to choose him and to choose his commandments to obey. And so to me, it's more of an inspiration to work more for God and try to get it finished as fast as possible, get that work done, and then he will come back. Does that sound crazy?
I like what you have to say, but for me, I still struggle with, I think of Noah, the door was shut and then they waited for 7 days. And I go, why? Why did God make them wait for 7 days? Why did God make Saul wait for 7 days? Why did the Israelites have to walk through the desert for, all those years and couldn't even enter the promised land, most of them? Like, I think what I'm trying to say is that we need to understand that when we walk through the Christian walk, there's challenges and we need to be real about it. Saul had a challenge, encountered a challenge. Now, I look at Saul's life and I see a constant misalignment in his entire life. And so I see God's purpose and I see God's reasoning for doing what he did with Saul. I don't always see that in everybody's life and I don't always understand it. God has a reason, and I know we have to trust him with those reasons. But when we talk to people out there, whether they're Christian or not, we need to acknowledge that there are struggles. And sometimes those struggles come from the fact that they don't see what God is waiting for. And we don't always see what God is waiting for. And we need to have that discussion.
I think what I've seen in lots of stories in the Bible and even in my own experience is that waiting happens because I need to know, or that person needs to know, that it is nothing in their own power or control that has brought this about. There's nothing that my skill, my talent, my whatever did to make it happen. And I think that's part, or at least for some of the things, that is the why. Because in this scenario here with Saul, he is okay, well, God's not showing up just quite yet, so I'll do it. I'll do it myself. And I know for me personally, that's something I have to struggle with. Well, I can do it myself, you know. And so I think sometimes God makes us wait until we acknowledge that it isn't us that's doing it. It isn't a coincidence that it happened. And I think the faster we acknowledge God in his power and might running the show, I think the less we'll have to wait.
Yeah,
But
James.
can't we-
Yeah, go ahead. Is that Gary or?
Yeah, I was just going to say, but can't we, if we pray and ask for the Holy Spirit to fill us and make can't we work with God in completing the work? I'm still getting, thinking about the second coming. I would never dare. Well, no, I shouldn't say I would never dare. I've done so many bad things in my life that, but I think I think God wants us to work with him in a partnership and, and help our pastors too, as, we shouldn't put it all on our pastors to do the work. And, and it should all be done with the spirit of prayer all the time, mindful of prayer.
I have a Bible text here. We need to start moving into our prayer time now, but James 1, verses 3 and 4, this is from the King James Version. Knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience, but let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. So God's plans, God's ways are not always our ways. Waiting can be a great challenge. And so, folks, we have been exploring tonight one man's journey of faith. In the wings, there's another man. And sometimes, when we think about faith and we look at a man who's struggling with his faith, it teaches us a lot about what real faith is like. And I'm just so glad that, I'm not Saul. I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. What a difficult path he had to walk. Very, very difficult path he had to walk. I don't know exactly what path you're experiencing in your own personal lives, in your intimate personal lives, the life that you don't bear to the rest of us, the struggles you're having. But the promise of the gospel that I just love is that God promises he'll never leave us or forsake us. He promises to be with us. And Philippians 1:6, I said it once, I'll say it a million times. I love that verse. He who's begun a good work in you will bring it to completion.